today we're talking about upgrading your primary design tool. We're the IT company who helps architecture, design, and engineering firms. We've done many of these through different iterations of various design tools. So Revit 2023 is one example, but there are others that we can help you kind of scope out how to make, well, a framework around how to make a decision, and then a framework for the whole upgrade process and the costs along with that. Now you hear chats popping up. That's a lot of times your questions. Nancy, who's here with us, she'll pop your questions into the Teams chat, and that's how we'll be able to get to them. Because we can't watch the stream that's 20 seconds in the past and live in the present. Speaking of living in the present, we only have 3,276 or something like that Wednesdays left in our lives. So let's make this count. Let's make, we want to make your time valuable, and don't be shy. Ask your questions as we go along, because everybody will have slightly different take on the upgrade process. Here, let me introduce the expert. The expert is the founder, CEO, and generally like one of the best men that I know. His name is Boris Rappaport. Generally, yeah. And he'll be the one I poke today with questions that I think you would be asking, as well as your own questions on chat. Okay. And again, deeply apologizing for the
technical
delay,
difficulties.
But we solved it, right? So that's gotta say something. Anyway, Boris, let's get into this. So how are people approaching the decisions? Like, is it typically when the new version comes out, people jump right away, start looking at features? How do companies, or how do you recommend, or how do you see good companies approach this primary design tool upgrade thought process initially?
Thanks, Alex, for bringing this up. I think we need to talk about kind of high level view of what the framework and the process looks like. And I think the decision has to be made based on evaluating multiple factors. One of the primary factors is this new tool, does it have the features that are going to improve our internal workflow? Because a lot of times what we find is, we upgrade for sake of upgrading, but we're not really using the new features that are, that are promised by the upgrade or that are included as part of the new tool. So we want to evaluate the new features and understand how much, how much improvement and how much time savings, how much cost savings those new features can bring to our design workflow. That would be step one.
So maybe talk a little bit more about that. How do you, what's the timing of this? I run a company, new version of Teams comes out. I'm not jumping on it right away, but it comes in my viewpoint at some point, at a conference, at a conversation, and I begin thinking through that. Is there some advice? Do you have some advice, or have you seen something done in that preliminary stage? As a principal, how do I even how do I decide whether this feature is going to give us time or not, save us time or save us money or give us better presentation to clients, whatever the case may be?
I think it comes from the experience and understanding if you can use the tool in your design process. For example, one of the, I think, cool features that were introduced in Revit in the last couple of years was the ability to study motion of people through the building, which they didn't have that built in before. You had to use a third-party tool plugin, but then they introduced it in there, and we see a lot of you see a lot of our customers utilizing that tool and actually saving themselves time and most likely money as well. So those are kind of features that we're talking about, something that can definitely be beneficial for you and your clients down the line, to provide those additional studies or matrix and show them additional benefits of your service as an architect.
Gotcha. All right. So now I'm an architect with we're going to use like a 30-person firm, right, as an example, and feel free to extrapolate to your size firm. But now we've sort of made a decision that this is interesting to us. This could potentially be significant for us. Now what? Let's talk about, first of all, the costs, right? I think that's kind of what what's on a lot of our minds as business owners, as business people, the costs of upgrade. You want to walk us through what that may look like?
I think before we jump into that, though, I also want to make sure that we add some resources to the chat where people can go and find out what the newest feature sets are. And it's not just for Revit as the primary design tool, but also for other tools like ArchiCAD and Vectorworks. So I think Nancy can put that in the chat. That would be great. But to answer your question, Alex, as we research those additional resources and then we decide to plan for an upgrade, the costs around upgrading, I mean, there's multiple components to it. There is a cost of the software and licensing itself, right? Depending on which software you use and your license model, you may need to invest additional money into purchasing the new version of the software. If you're on a subscription service, usually that is included as part of your subscription. So that's one of the benefits of being on a subscription service is you get access to upgrades for the life of your subscription. But if you're not, if you have still using some older software like, Revit 2016, 2017, 2018 that you've still purchased as a perpetual license outside of the subscription, then upgrading to the latest version will cost you some additional dollars. That would be cost number one. Additionally, we need to look at, the cost of training. Again, if you're running some older versions, the jump may be too big for you where you would need some additional training as well. And, cost of hardware, because you may need to upgrade your systems to handle the newest version.
Let's talk about the IT transitional cost, the actual, putting software in machines and making sure it's running smoothly. So if someone has an IT partner, if they're working with us or someone else, what does it look like typically? How does that, how do they budget for it?
Well, usually for many IT companies and managed IT services, and obviously depends on your contract, but usually this would be an additional service that the IT provider charges you for. So usually anything that needs to be planned out as a massive software rollout to the whole company is going to be an additional service. And the way, the rough estimate, this is a budgetary number, kind of high level, because most likely it's going to be less expensive, but the rough estimate should be around 1 hour per workstation to get the software installed, make sure that it's working properly, everything is tested, all the plugins kind of are added, and, opening a couple of test projects, trying to upgrade a test project from previous version of the software, whether it's Revit, ArchiCAD, or Vectorworks. So yeah, the budgetary number is about 1 hour per workstation.
So in our example, 30-person firm, 20 machines times 1 hour, 20 hours or so, whatever your IT provider's hourly rate is, agreed upon hourly rate is. Okay. You mentioned, I want to jump into the upgrade roadmap soon, guys. I think that's kind of where the juice is to help you kind of think through that part. But before we go there, you mentioned learning curve. Can you give us a little bit of I know different, like 2023 will be different than the previous version, but what do you see there? Is it typically pretty steep, and what does it depend? And the length of the learning curve, the expense of the learning curve depends on time invested. How do you see potentially companies compress that?
So, I mean, if you're upgrading from previous couple of versions, like if you're version, let's just say 21 of Revit going to version 23, I don't think the learning curve is steep. I don't think there's a lot more that you need to learn. So most of your staff should be fairly comfortable if they're working in 21 or 22, working in 23. I think if you're going from like 2016, 2017, or 2018, there could be some additional things that you may need to consider, especially since you're going to be changing the licensing, kind of signing up for a new license and the new Autodesk portal. And then all those additional tools that have been implemented since, let's just say 2016, in the last 7 years, and you want to utilize those tools, that's probably where the added learning curve would be. And most, if not all, Autodesk resellers, and I'm just saying Autodesk because that's the primary tool for right now, in the industry. Most Autodesk resellers will offer you some sort of training to go over those new features. So you can contact your reseller and work with them to get you training and get your whole team trained up. For ArchiCAD, there's training directly from Graphisoft and also some of the resellers that they have. And I think it's the same for Vectorworks as well. You can work with the reseller to try and get that training for your team.
Gotcha. And the reseller will scope it out and be able to give you options.
Yeah, in most cases, if you've already used the software before and you're not switching tools, right, just upgrading versions, you probably need half a day of training for your team to get everybody caught up.
It's not too bad. All right, so let's talk about upgrading roadmap. Let's say a company has made that decision. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you aren't on this live stream, go ahead and type in your question. If you have any questions on some of the, how to make decision around new features, as well as the costs of upgrades. If you have any questions on those and the learning curve, please ask. We're going to jump into the upgrade roadmap. We've already sort of decided to move forward with the upgrade. We've already put a budget together. Now the process begins. Boris, walk us through. Let's just, first of all, let's just do a framework very quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4. What are the steps? What are the main steps, I guess, waypoints in upgrade roadmap?
So I'll go back to the initial step of understanding and evaluating the features. And then your next step should be, well, these features look great. I think we need to upgrade. So then your next step should be is finding 1, 2, or 3 people who are your power users, your most technically savvy people in the organization, and get the software installed for them. And this will effectively be your pilot group so that they can experiment with the new software and make sure that those features are actually working the way that you're expecting them to work. And also that there's no additional bugs in the software. A lot of times what we see as the software just comes out, it's fairly buggy. Right, unless there's a driver to implement a certain feature, we should stay away from upgrading right away. But the only way to find out if there's additional bugs or if there's additional things we need to do from a plugin perspective, maybe our plugins need to be upgraded, is to run that pilot that we're talking about. So you install it on 2, 3 machines. You'd create a new project using the new software and see if there's any process differences between version 23 and previous versions, for example. You'd want to run all of your plugins on that project just to make sure that there's no other compatibility issues. And that process usually takes 2 months or so just to make sure that you're testing it properly. Once the pilot is done and once you're comfortable with the fact that all of your workflow doesn't need to change much, or if it changes, you're comfortable with those changes, then we can plan a rollout to the rest of the team.
Now, does IT team typically help with the pilot? Yeah, or part? If so, what part of the what part do we play?
So yeah, would help with the installation of the software for those people. Would give some basic training if anything is needed. We'd make sure that the software launches properly. We'd make sure that we can create a new test project, and would make sure that we can upgrade one of the projects from previous version, just on that basic level. After that, we'll let the team, run with those projects and do what they do best.
Okay. Have you personally seen any noteworthy issues and or big wins with running a pilot in the past? Like, what's some of the do's and don'ts, some of the cautionary tales, if you will?
Well, the biggest win with running a pilot is uncovering those things that you may not have considered, right? So yes, well, one of the things we've come across in the past is what I've talked about. There's a plugin that works fine in Revit 21, but is not compatible with Revit 22, for example. And it's because they haven't written the code to be compatible with Revit 22. So at that point, we have to put a stop on the pilot, or we have to put a stop on the rollout and wait for that later version to come out. And once the later version comes out, then we also need to make sure that it's backwards compatible with some of the older versions of Revit. One of the things we found is sometimes the latest plugin is not compatible with the other one. So there's compatibility issues is one of the biggest things that you need to pay attention to, along with just bugs in the software, right? Usually the first version of the software that comes out is not very well tested. And kind of the general rule of thumb of, installing upgrades is wait for the first service pack or the first major update to come out. So instead of installing version 2023, wait until 2023.1 comes out to make sure that you're getting the bug fixes from previous.
So when is that usually? What's the timeline usually for companies like Revit to release 0.1 or
It
1?
depends. I'd say 3-4 months.
3 months. Okay, gotcha. Have you seen failed pilots? And if so, what happened?
I don't think we can call it a failed pilot, right? Because the goal of the pilot is to figure out whether you're going to move with the upgrade or not. So pilot would be a success if it finds an issue and you don't move forward with the upgrade and kind of render your whole company useless. That's still a success. But yes, so what I've just talked about, plugins, issues, bugs, those can all kind of slow down the rollout and will be uncovered during the pilot phase.
Is it typically in like shops we work with or you work with directly, do people have this one person or two people who kind of front runners and are willing to test, or do you see principals or otherwise business leaders designate someone as a tester? Because there's quite like an additional workload, right, on them besides their regular work. They got to deliver projects, but they also got to test out the software. How do you see that dynamic work?
Usually there is one or two people who are really tech savvy, who want to learn new stuff and always raising their hand to participate in these type of pilots. So yeah, I mean, across all our client base, I don't think I can come up with a customer that doesn't have a person or two like that.
Okay, gotcha. All right, thank you for that. So now we've run through a pilot. So these are typically 60 days. Let's say we didn't uncover big issues. We feel it's going to work for the business. We want to proceed. What's next?
So if we do want to proceed, we schedule a project, we create a project, we put together a timeline and basically start the rollout process, I guess, as part of that project. I mean, it's once we go to the pilot phase, it's pretty straightforward to roll it out to everybody else. It's just physical work to get stuff installed, configured, tested. Once it's installed, configured, and tested, then you're ready to go.
So you roll out to all employees at once, or you do staged rollouts? How does that work?
We would usually roll out to all employees at once, because again, our first stage is that pilot stage. If that gives us the green light, most likely nobody else is going to have the issues. So we would schedule time, either a weekend or after hours, to just get the software installed for everybody. And depending on the size of the firm, that's the number of resources that we need on our side.
Got it. And the reseller needs to have training already scheduled or have completed by the time you go live, right?
Yeah, I think as you're doing the pilot, and at that time, you should probably also do the half a day to a day training if you need it.
Gotcha. So, all right. And then, so install configuration happens, then go live happens. Then You mentioned something about project conversion because all the projects are sitting in a previous version, right? How does that look like?
So it depends on how long your projects usually last. If you are, if you're working on bigger commercial projects, then at some point you will want to do a conversion. If you're working on smaller projects that usually don't last more than, couple of years, then you'd probably okay sticking with the older version and just using that version, unless you need the specific feature set to complete the project. So if the project conversion with most of the software is pretty straightforward. If you're opening that project in a new version, then it's going to either auto convert or prompt you to convert the project. Now you want to be mindful that everybody who is participating in that project, whether it's on your team or your consultants, collaborators, owners, they all need to be, once the project is converted to the newer version, they all need to be on that newer version. So usually, unless there's a specific driver to upgrade the project should stay on previous version, or everybody needs to be coordinated and install the latest version of the software to work on.
Gotcha. All right. So those of you listening tuned in live mode, would love to hear your feedback and thoughts. Have you gone through the upgrade? How did it go? Are you thinking about the upgrade? What are your questions? And as we're getting those in, let me kind of sum things up real quick. So, something comes out, you review the features, you figure out that is potentially a big opportunity for your company. You want to move forward with the upgrade. Boris says wait to 0.1 version, .1, which means a couple of months after initial release is probably good practice. But hey, if there's a core feature and it saves tons of money and saves time, maybe someone wants to move faster. If that's the case, then you kind of budget out what the cost of upgrade costs may look like from a time as well as cost, physical dollars perspective, and then you set up a pilot, right? You run a pilot, you then win, lose there. Say you win, you move on to installation, configuration of the process. That's what essentially your IT company does that lift, as well as setting up your pilot for you. Then you convert some key projects. Then you're, you train your team. I got to step back a second. It's train your team during pilot. Then you do configure over the weekend or something like that. Then you go live. And now you take advantage of all the new features. That's sort of, did I miss any steps here?
No, that sounds great.
Okay. So that's your high level stuff. We'll also put in the article and we'll give you sort of that framework. So it's easy to look at. Do you see questions? Do you guys have any questions at all on this topic? Have you had the experience with this, successful or failed upgrades in the past? Give us some thoughts. This is interesting because I thought this would be the topic that has the most questions. And last two, we had quite a bit of engagement. This one looks like people just here to get the info, what that upgrade may look like, or process may look like. So if you guys have questions post this event, want to have more specific answer tailored to your company, you can always reach out to us. There's no cost for that. If you're not a client, we'll just walk you through that, how we think about the project and what that may look like for you. We are at getarchit.com. Otherwise, Boris, do you have any parting thoughts?
Just everybody, thank you for attending, and have a great rest of your day. That's all I can wish for.
Absolutely. We truly hope this was helpful to you. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic day. Remember, make it a good one. See you next time.
See you, everyone.